Today is our reading, so that means that today we finish the story, okay? Today I'm going to teach you that good readers, when you reach the turning point, when you reach the most important part of the story, because we have already reached the turning point, and the turning point in this story was, what do you think is the most important thing right now that has happened in Poppy? What do you think is like, at first, the turning point, like the story's going this way, Mr. Okax is not letting them move, Mr. Okax is being a bully, Mr. Okax doesn't want them to move to Newhouse, and then something changed. Something changed in the story. What changed, Abram? Exactly. So what Abram just said was that there was a fake owl in the barn. There was a fake owl in the barn, and this changes everything. The story was going like this and like this and like this, and then we found out about the fake owl, and now we found a weakness in Mr. Okax. He is a big chicken, right? He's afraid of porcupines. He's afraid of the big owl that, by the way, it's fake. He's afraid of a fake owl. He's afraid of losing. Well, he thinks it's a real owl. He's afraid of losing his dinners to this humongously fake owl. Okay, so when we get to the reading, I teach you that when you get to the very end of a book, there's no more stopping. There's no more, let's talk about it. There's no more, let's write in our reading notebook. There's no more of that. Now, I'm going to teach you that as you get ready to finish a book, you have to read it without interruption. Read it all the way to the end to get that satisfaction, that satisfying feeling of being done with this book. Okay? So before we finish this book, I know that the author is going to, usually by the end of the book, the author is going to answer some of our questions. Because I know right now you guys have lots of questions. What's going to happen to Poppy? What's going to happen to Poppy's family? Well, how is Poppy going to get the salt lick? What's going to happen with Mr. Okax? Are they just going to ignore him, and are they just going to go to Newhouse? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? We have all of these questions, but by the time that we finish this book, your questions are going to be answered. Those loose ends, the author is going to tie up those loose ends. Okay? All right, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. I am going to put myself in, I'm going to pin my video, where am I? And then go to speaker view. So boys and girls, go ahead and pin my video or use a little thumbtack, or just switch it over to speaker view, because right now you're probably in gallery view where you can see all of your friends. I love that you want to see your friends, but click on speaker view right now so you can only see me and you can see where I'm at and all that good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go to speaker view, and here we go. We are on chapter 17, A Surprising Conversation. Poppy woke refreshed. For a moment, she just lay still, luxuriating in her discoveries. She imagined telling her family what a phony Mr. Okax was. What a delicious moment. Yes, it was time to return home. Realizing that she was very, very hungry, Poppy first treated herself to a big meal. eating only the plumpest corn kernels. Hadn't she deserved them? Gradually, she ate her way over to the dirt road that ran alongside Dimwood Forest. With her mouth full and her belly tight, she gazed across at the wall of pine and fir. She had feared it before. Now, knowing it, she recalled only its dark beauty, its deep fascination. The forest made her think of Aerith and her promise. How was she going to get him the salt? Still, she had no idea. Then and there, she vowed that once she got home, she would return. Maybe this time with Cousin Basil. Perhaps the two of them could find a way. Poppy thought about Mr. Okax too. Wouldn't it be fun to tell him what she had discovered? The image of it made her grin. The liar, the bully. It was while she was thinking about him that she spied him. Mr. Okax was perched deep within the foliage on a small tree right by the edge of the forest. If it had not been for the slanting rays of the sun, Poppy might never have noticed. It was the light of his glowing eyes that caught her attention. Poppy crept forward. When she came near the row of corn closest to the forest, she looked up again. A moody Mr. Okax was staring at the barn across the field. He kept moving his head about, back, forth, side to side, hissing and clacking his beak. Sometimes his black talons clenched the branch with nervous tension. At other times, he ruffled his feathers, lifted his wings, let his head sink lower. Poppy could tell that he was miserable, sulking. She had to marvel at how different he appeared from the time she'd seen him on his watching tree in the rain. All that glaring and hissing, he's just a frightened bully, she said to herself with jubilation. She had to slap a paw over her mouth to keep from laughing out loud. What fun it would be to humiliate him. Just the idea of it brought a feeling of power. Unable to resist teasing him, she called out, "Mr. Okax!" Poppy's getting brave. The owl, taken by surprise, looked up, looked down, and around. "Here! Yoo-hoo!" Poppy cried. "In the cord! It's me, Poppy!" Mr. Okax hunched over and peered in her general direction. "Show yourself," he said harshly. I'll stay where I am, thank you." Poppy returned. Wedged in as she was among the cornstalks, she felt totally secure. She knew he could not reach her there. "Mr. Okax," she called, "is it the owl on the barn you're looking at?" "What's it to you?" he growled. "You're frightened of it, aren't you?" Poppy said. Mr. Okax opened his beak, but no sound came out. Instead, he kept peering into the corn. Poppy said, "It's awful to be frightened, isn't it?" "What did you say?" "I said it's not fun being frightened, is it?" To this, Mr. Okax said nothing. "I could tell you a little something about the owl," Poppy called, feeling altogether giddy with her knowledge. "What is something?" the owl asked. "Want to talk about it?" Poppy offered, suppressing a giggle. "Well, I might as well say it to you. I'm going to tell my family." Mr. Okak shifted uncomfortably on his perch. I'll talk, he said. Then he added, but we could talk more easily if I could see you. To Poppy's ears, the owl's tone had shifted. It was not nearly so hostile as it had been. She was only imagining that. Was she only imagining that? Should she trust him? No. Boys and girls, should she trust him? No. Yes or no? Everyone online is saying no, and everyone in class is saying no. Should she trust him? No. But even as she asked herself that question, she thought, oh, the look on his face when I tell him that the bird he's so frightened of is nothing but a fake. Aloud, she called, would you really like to talk with me? To talk about it with me? Yes, I would, replied Mr. Okax. You seem to be a very smart mouse. Poppy blushed. No one had ever called her smart before. This, she had to admit, was a very different side to Mr. Okax from what she had known. Ragweed, in his way, had challenged him. As for her father, he had been very timid in his approach. Perhaps the owl would respect someone who stood up to him politely but firmly. Do you really think I'm smart? She inquired. I certainly do, the owl said. Yes, perhaps the two of us should just sit down and talk. The two smart ones. Maybe we can work something out. Poppy felt a stirring of excitement. Here she was, Poppy, talking in a perfectly reasonable way with the great Mr. Okax. It was she, with her knowledge, who had gained power. Perhaps instead of humiliating him, she could work things out reasonably so the mice could move to Newhouse. Wouldn't that be a trophy to bring home? So thinking, she moved away from her hiding place, a little onto the dirt road. Yes, Mr. Okax said soothingly. Let the two of us talk things over. I think we could find some reasonable solutions. All right, said Poppy. Boldly, she stepped farther out on the road. Remember, boys and girls, when she was talking to Mr. Okax, she was hiding in the corn. But now she's going out into the open in the middle of the road. Let's see what happens. She looked up. Mr. Okax was gone. Where are you? She cried. At that moment, the owl plunged down upon her from behind. Chapter 18. The battle. Here we go. Ragweed's earring saved her. So powerful, so swift was Mr. Okax's descent that he pushed a wave of air before him and caused the earring to flutter. The flutter felt like the tap of a tiny finger on Poppy's ear. She felt it and whirled. At the last possible second, she saw the owl coming and made a leap to safety. The next moment, however, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had leaped not back among the corn, but farther into the open road. Mr. Okax was now on the ground, blocking her way to the field. He was blocking the corn. She spun toward the forest. In a second, the owl was up in the air and down on the other side. Once again, he had blocked her way. Not so smart as all that, are ya? He sneered. Well, I don't compromise. I don't compromise with what I want, he told her. And what I want is you never getting home alive. He made a sudden darting movement to the left. Poppy jumped to the right, but Mr. Okax was ahead of her. Just as quickly, he shifted back toward her so that Poppy was forced to halt herself clumsily. There she stood, flat-footed, panting, not sure which way to go. The owl towering over her laughed. Ha 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 ha! I told you what would happen if I caught up with you again, didn't I? But this time, you won't have that fat porcupine to help you. So saying, he made a snap at her with his beak. Mr. Okax's mention of Aerith was the reminder Poppy needed. She reached down and yanked what? What does she have on her belt? Say it, go. The quill. She yanked the quill from her sash, then held it before her like a sword. At first, Mr. Okax blinked. Then he snickered. You think that one of his quills is going to stop me, do you? The owl on the barn, Poppy panted between hard breathing, is just a fake. You've been frightened by a fake owl. Mr. Okax's beak dropped. Oh, yeah. He hesitated. In that moment, Poppy sensed she could have gotten away, but she could not resist another taunt. You're not an owl. You're a chicken, she cried in triumph. For an instant, the two of them, owl and mouse, confronted each other. Then a look of terrible rage passed across the owl's face. Poppy knew then she'd made another blunder, another mistake. She'd lost her momentary chance of escape. Now there was nothing he'd not to do to kill her. Here's the picture of the battle. There's Poppy and Mr. Okax. She would have to fight him. Trembling, she flourished the quill. In response, Mr. Okax spread his wings, then beat them down hard with them upon the road. They threw up a cloud of dust. It was hard for Poppy to breathe, because much less see. She took a step back, only to hear a sound behind her. Confused, she turned. Hidden by the dust, Mr. Okax had overleaped the road. Once again, he was behind her. From there, he made a slash at her with his beak. Poppy struck out with her quill. Seeing the quill and realizing the danger to his eyes, the owl pulled back. He glared at Poppy. He snapped his beak. Poppy stared back, a grim face, gasping for breath, waving the quill before her. If it takes the whole night, I will wear you down, Mr. Okax hissed. All it takes is one mistake on your part. Then you're done. Finished. He made a forward feint. Poppy danced nimbly back. Mr. Okax struck again. This time it was not with his beak, but with his talons. Poppy, quill up, dodged the talons with a quick sidestep, but she knew her only hope was to get into the corn and hide. Otherwise, the owl would overpower her. Making sure of her footing, she began to move back toward the forest. Just as she had hoped, Mr. Okax leaped up and landed between her and the trees. It was then that she raced for the corn. Mr. Okax was just as fast. Grasping her strategy, he barely touched earth when he took a flying hop forward to block her way. He had advanced wildly now, snapping and snarling. In response, Poppy slashed wildly with her quill. Once she struck out at the owl's face, but only hit his feathers. But though the blow glanced off harmlessly, it served to infuriate him. So the more and more he's fighting her, the more and more he's getting angry. He is so angry right now. Mr. Okax, closing in, darted his head in and out, side to side. Poppy was bewildered. She was confused. Then the owl turned briefly away from her. In a flash, she made a successful rolling dive under his wing. She was behind Mr. Okax at last. On the corn side of the road, she started to run. He turned his head in a complete half circle, saw her, and spun his whole body about. His right wing extended full length. The wing tip struck Poppy, a glancing blow to her head. Down she tumbled and landed on her back in the dust. Seizing his advantage, Mr. Okax pounced, beak open, tongue out, hissing. Poppy whipped the air with the quill. The tip of it pricked the owl's tongue. He screamed in rage and reeled back. Poppy had just time enough to regain her feet. Once more, she faced him, quill at the ready. Mr. Okax, stung, pressed forward now this way, now that, head bobbing, weaving, viciously snapping with his beak. Increasingly exhausted, Poppy was forced to give ground. She crumpled to her knees. It was the moment the owl had been waiting for. With a powerful kick, he thrust his left claw, talons spread wide at Poppy's head. Poppy saw the claw coming and, using all of her strength to grip the quill. So this is my quill. Okay. So she's on her knees. She sees Mr. Okax's talons coming down, and she goes like this. She's gripping. Top of page 146, boys and girls. Poppy saw the claw coming, using all of her strength to grip the quill. She held it with both paws to protect herself and jabbed it into Mr. Okax's claw as it came down. The owl gave a great squawk, fell back, began to roll about violently. Fearful of losing the quill, her only weapon, Poppy pulled on it with all of her might, but the barbs had caught in Okax's claw. She could not get the quill loose. She was being dragged and bumped along. She was not letting go of the quill. Mr. Okax, squawking, hissing, flew like one possessed. Up, down, and around he went, making loops and stalling dives, climbing and twisting anything and everything to work the quill from his claw. But the more he flexed and twisted, the more the barbs worked themselves into his claw, causing even more excruciating pain. Poppy hung on. Look at this picture here. Mr. Okax is in excruciating pain, and there is Poppy with the quill. She's not letting go of the quill. The fact that Mr. Okax was dragging a claw, and from that claw dangled a mouse, greatly impeded his flying. His flight path became increasingly wild in his desperate desire to rid himself of pain. Mr. Okax ceased to look where he was heading. Violently, he plunged toward the cornfield. Once over it, he lowered his left claw, and that meant Poppy deliberately thumping it and her along the corn stalks in hope that the quill would be jerked out. Poppy was being battered, but each time she decided to release her hold on the quill, the owl surged forward, causing her to cling to it more convulsively than ever. So right now, Mr. Okax is flying over the cornfield. Poppy is holding on for dear life. She's holding on to her quill because she does not want to lose her only weapon. But Mr. Okax is flying close to the cornfield, and he's hitting Poppy with the corn as he's flying. Knowing she could not take much more, Poppy tried to see ahead. Mr. Okax was skimming low over the corn tops, but when he passed beyond them, he dropped toward the ground. Let go, Poppy told herself. Let go. But she was feeling so groggy, her own muscles would not respond. Then she saw what the owl was aiming for, the salt lick, and he was picking up speed. In his madness, he was preparing to strike his claw on that. Poppy had wits enough to sense that if she struck the hard salt, it would be the end of her. Let go, she cried to herself again. This time she did. Down she plummeted. As she did, Mr. Okax first arose and then dropped, totally out of control. He slammed into the salt head on. Boom! So great was the blow that the salt shattered while the owl went tumbling over tail in an explosion of feathers. After 3 flips, he flopped down like a sack of potatoes on the ground. As for Poppy, she had landed on the grass. For a moment, she lay there, stunned, battered, and confused. She looked up into the sky, but saw nothing. Then she looked across the lawn. She saw him. Then Mr. Okax lay on his back, perfectly still. His claws were up over his chest, slightly curled. The quill still stuck out of the left one. Scattered about among the feathers were chunks of salt. Poppy stumbled to her feet. She took a wobbly step or two toward the cornfield. Then she stopped and looked back. Mr. Okax had not moved. Then she stopped and looked. Slowly, not sure if she should believe what she was thinking, she crept closer to the fearsome owl. After every few steps, she paused, looked, sniffed. Still, there was no movement. Should she get close to Mr. Okax? What do you think? No? What do you guys think online? Do you think she should get close to Mr. Okax? What if he's pretending? Oh, we'll see. Page 151. Top of page 151. Close to Mr. Okax's head now, Poppy stopped again. The owl's great eyes were wide open, staring up into the sky. His devil-like tufts of feathers were bent. His beak was open. As Poppy watched, it snapped listlessly. Mr. Okax? No answer. She took a step closer. Mr. Okax? His head turned slightly. For a moment, his eyes seemed to focus on her. Sometimes, he murmured. Sometimes I wonder why I bother to protect you. With that, his beak made a final clack shut. His eyes closed. Poppy knew it then. Mr. Okax was no longer alive. no longer alive. Chapter 19, page 152. This one is called The Return. For a long time, Poppy gazed at the lifeless body of Mr. Okax. She thought she should be feeling triumphant joy, plain gladness would have been good enough. Somewhere she did feel proud. She felt pride. But small as she was, it was buried deep. What Poppy felt was weariness, as if she had aged 4 seasons over the last hour. She felt old. Before her on the grass lay one of Mr. Okax's feathers. Poppy had never really looked at an owl's feather. This one was quite lovely. It was a moderate brown color with a white tuft on top, soft as any baby's breath. She picked it up. In the breeze, the veins stirred slightly. With a sigh, Poppy slipped the feather into her sash. Then she turned and looked at the cornfield. At first, she thought what she most desired was to lie down and sleep. It was growing dark, but a moment's thought made her realize sleep was impossible. What she needed to do was tell someone about her discoveries and what had happened. She crossed the dirt road and moved along the edge of the forest. There was enough of the porcupine lingering scent for Poppy to find the trail that Aerith had used to go from his home to the field. For once, and it made her smile wanly, she was grateful for the old fellow's stink. Plunging directly into Dimwood Forest, Poppy traveled slowly, methodically, taking the time for proper precautions. Now and again, she paused to absorb the lush view. The way moonlight filtered through the fragrant air, a very tall tree, a particularly beautiful fern, a bush laden with blackberries as big as her head. When Poppy reached Aerith's log, she paused long enough to contemplate Mr. Okax's now abandoned snag. Who, she wondered, would live in it now? Aerith, she called into the log from the entryway. Are you home, Aerith? In response, there was some scratching and snorting deep within. That you, Aerith? Who the snail squirt is that? Came the growled reply. Can't a creature have any privacy around here? Beat it unless you want to eat a quail sandwich. Aerith, it's me, Poppy. Oh, don't you remember? Poppy. Poppy, came the echo with more enthusiasm than before. A great rattling and shuffling could be heard. Then Aerith's grill-flat face loomed out of the darkness. That really you, girl? Where is it? Where is what? The salt! Didn't you bring it? Aerith, it's about Mr. Okax. I don't give a flea's flick for that jerk of an owl. Where's the salt you promised me? It's there, by Newhouse, all broken up on the ground. On the ground? Aerith shrieked. What's it doing there? Aerith, I couldn't carry it. And besides, on the ground, great snail swuggle, it'll melt to nothing. The porcupine came barreling by so fast, Poppy had to leap aside. The next moment, she was all but running down the trail. Can I sleep here? Poppy called after him. Can't stop the talk, Aerith called back, and indeed he was gone. Where's he going, boys and girls? Where's he going, Landon? He's going to go eat some salt. Yeah, okay. And indeed he was gone. Poppy stepped into the log, lay down, and was asleep at once. She slept until the sun was high. When she woke, Aerith had not yet returned, so she went out, found some seeds, ate them, returned to the log, and slept again until dusk. This time, when she awoke, Aerith was there. He was chewing in a roisterous, slobbering way on a chunk of salt. Hello, Poppy said. Aerith didn't even look up. Delicious, best salt I've ever had. He licked his lips. Awesome! Then you got some of it. Some of it? All of it. I'm just about ossified. This is the last bit. It was all pure, wonderful salt. Absolutely delicious, amazing, divine. Aerith, what's that? Did you see Mr. Okax? Oh, yeah, him? Dead. What happened? Poppy told him. The porcupine, though busy with the salt, slowed his slobbering to listen. When Poppy finished her story, she asked Aerith, what do you think? Aerith shook his head. Never thought I'd appreciate that owl's hard head. But if what you say is true, it is. Well, I'm grateful he broke up the salt lick. Really, Poppy, it's incredible stuff. You want some? I mean, a small taste, just a little itty bitty taste. I don't want you to have any. Aerith, what's that? I'm going home now. May I come and visit? Sure, Poppy, sure. Anytime. And bring some salt. I'm going now. Poppy! What? You're the salt of the earth. Poppy crossed Glitter Creek by using the bridge. The rest of the way, she traveled by the side of the tar road. By the time she reached Gray House, it was late. The first thing she noticed was that the red flag was flying. Do you guys remember why the red flag was flying, April? There's an emergency meeting going on. Good job, good memory. She climbed the porch steps slowly. Instead of going right inside, she took a peek. The entire family was gathered in the front parlor. Lungwort stood atop the old straw hat, apparently in the middle of a speech. And so, dear friends, we will have to break up the family. Yes, disperse. Go our separate ways. Forage on our own. There is insufficient food for us here. But first, I wish to engage in a brief memorial tribute to our full family, which, Poppy? Is that you, Poppy? She stepped inside. All the mice turned to stare. Poppy gazed at them evenly. Then she pulled the feather, Mr. Okax's feather, from her sash and held it aloft for all to see. Mr. Okax is dead, she said solemnly. And I can tell you that the new house is right next to a big field of corn that has enough food, that has enough to feed us all forever and ever. Oh, Poppy, Lungwort cried triumphantly. Didn't I say that if you listened to my advice, all would be well? Chapter 20, A New Beginning. Almost 13 full moons to the night since Mr. Okax killed Ragweed, Poppy and her husband, Rye, now, how they met and married is another story, stood on Bannock Hill with their litter of 11 young mice. They had formed a circle around a small hazelnut tree. Looking beneath a full golden moon was Aerith the porcupine. This tree, Poppy was saying to her rather restless children, was planted after a fashion by my late and dear friend Ragweed. I can't be sure that it was he who dropped the seed nut from which this tree has grown, but I would like to think so. Though it is rather frail now, someday this tree will be mighty. I want to affix this. Here, she held up a small earring. to a high branch, so as the tree grows, it will glitter in the night sky for all of us to see. Hey, does Ma love making long speeches, or does she, or does she? Whispered one of the litter to one of her brothers. And here on Baddock Hill, Poppy went on, once forbidden to us, though we too live in Dimwood Forest, we shall have our dancing place. It doesn't matter how you dance, my children, slow or fast, by jumps or steps, as long as you are free to dance in the open air by the light of the moon. All will be well. Now, Aerith, if you please. Old Aerith, murmuring, mouse mock, under his breath, gave a grunt, but began to shake and rattle his quills until he settled into a steady beat. Then the 11 young children began to dance their own way, with jiggles and jumps and leaps and lopes. As for Poppy and Rye, they spun round and round in a stately waltz, dancing by the light of the moon and the earring which glittered high on the hazelnut tree. The end. Here is Poppy and Rye. If you guys want to check out this book from the library, or maybe look for it on Epic, or Poppy and Rye is another book by Avie. Avie is the author. So at the very end of the book, there's just like a sneak peek. Have you guys ever been to the movies and then they have like little sneak peeks? They're called trailers before the movies. Well, that's what this is. This is like a sneak peek into the next book. The next book is called Poppy and Rye. So if you want to, it says from Poppy and Rye. If you want to check it out, go ahead, you can check it out, or maybe the library has it in the over by Safeway, or maybe, I don't know, you can find it on Epic. But if you want to read that book, you can. So boys and girls, the book is over. We are done with Poppy. How interesting. Remember, when Ragweed got killed, he was holding a hazelnut seed. And he was like, girl, you don't know how to live. And then, boom, he's dead. But remember, he was holding the hazelnut seed because he was about to eat it. And then he got taken by Mr. Okax, and he dropped the seed. And now, at the exact same spot that seed was dropped, there's a little tree growing right there. There's a little tree growing right there. Okay, so I am going to send you all, if you're watching online, I'm going to send you all the link. You have to take it today. You have to take it today. If you don't take it today, then it's not going to count for your AR goal, because tomorrow there's no school. And so when we come back from the weekend, it's going to be we're going to have to take the STAR test over again, and you're going to get new reading levels, and you're going to get new goals. Okay? So you have to take the Poppy book. You have to take the Poppy test today. Okay? So what I'm going to do, for those of you that are online, I'm going to send you the link for AR. Okay? I'm going to send you the link to AR, and so you can take it today. Remember, it's 40 points. 40 points. So do your best. If you miss some videos, watch the videos before you take it, because there might be questions on the test from those videos. Okay? All right, boys and girls, have a great day. I will be posting this video up very, very soon once it loads. And this was a longer video, so it's going to have to be with YouTube, so with video link. So that's going to be something that just be watching out for it. But yes, you have to take it today. If you don't take it today and you take it tomorrow, then it's not going to count for your AR goal. Okay? All right. We'll see you later. We'll see you later, boys and girls. If you have any questions, send me a message. I will see you next time. Bye-bye. See you next time. Great job. Thank you for coming.